The sun bakes the red earth and the wind whispers across the canyons. For the Apache, every meal was not simply about hunger. It was survival, resilience, and the wisdom of generations. Hidden in the shadows of mesquite trees and tucked beneath rocky soil were plants so vital that they could mean the difference between life and death. They weren't just food, they were stories, medicine, and memories bound into the land itself. But what were these forgotten vegetables, and why have their names almost vanished from memory? Let's find out. The Apache knew the desert not as an enemy, but as an old, stubborn friend. Beneath its cracked surface grew life, roots that hid from the sun, storing water and sustenance. Wild onions with their pungent bite were pulled carefully from the soil and roasted in the coals, turning sweet and soft. Wild carrots, smaller than their modern cousins, were dug with sharpened sticks, their thin orange bodies carrying a taste of earth and sun. Even more precious were the tubers of the biscuit root plant. The women would grind these into flour, a food so durable it could be carried on long hunts or during war parties. It was said the roots carried the strength of the mountains and, when eaten, gave a warrior the endurance to walk from dusk until the next dawn. To an outsider, the desert seemed empty, but to the Apache, each rock, each bush, and each dusty mound was a marker of memory, a place where the roots waited, patient, until the right hands came to find them. Squash wasn't just a vegetable, it was a legacy. The Apache grew and foraged several varieties, from small round gourds to long pale squash that stored well into the cold months. These plants were the offspring of seeds traded along ancient routes, carried in pouches, and planted wherever a camp stayed long enough to see them grow. In the summer sun, their vines spread low, guarding the soil with their broad leaves. The flesh of the squash, when roasted, turned soft and sweet, a welcome comfort in a land of sharp thorns and biting winds. The seeds were roasted, salted, and eaten on long journeys. But squash was more than food, it was strategy. In times of drought, it was one of the few crops that could cling to life in poor soil. Women and children tended the squash patches with quiet care, knowing each plant was a promise. A promise that even when hunting was lean, there would be something to place in the cooking pot. Corn was sacred, not because it was rare, but because it was constant. It was the food that tied the Apache to the land and to their allies in trade. While not grown in the vast fields seen among other tribes, corn was cultivated in small, hidden patches near streams and canyons where the soil held more life. The ears were harvested while still young for roasting or dried in the sun to be ground later into meal. This meal could become bread baked on hot stones or thickened into stews that warmed cold nights. Warriors carried parched corn, kernels roasted until hard and dry, light to carry and quick to prepare. Corn also played a role in the ceremony. The grinding stones sang their rough song under the hands of the women, the dust of the kernels rising like the breath of the earth. To eat corn was to be reminded that even in the hardest seasons, there was a thread connecting the present to the past and to those who had walked the same trails before. In the folds of the mountains and the shaded crevices where the desert softened its grip, the Apache gathered wild greens that kept their people strong. Lamb's quarters, purslane, and amaranth sprouted after rare rains, their tender leaves bursting with life. These were not farmed or tended. They were gifts, sudden and fleeting, appearing like secrets the land whispered only to those who listened. Women with woven baskets would climb into hidden valleys at first light, fingers brushing the dew from the leaves as they harvested. The greens were eaten fresh or boiled into soups thickened with cornmeal. Rich in minerals, they kept warriors from weakness and sickness during long campaigns. To the Apache, these wild greens were more than a meal, they were a sign. Their sudden appearance meant that the earth still remembered its promise to feed her children. And when they disappeared, it was a reminder to prepare for the lean months ahead. The cactus was a paradox, armed with spines sharp enough to pierce flesh, yet holding inside a treasure of water and food. The Apache knew each species by heart. Prickly pear pads were harvested carefully, the thorns singed away in the fire before slicing the flesh into strips for roasting or boiling. The flavor was tangy, the texture crisp, and it carried moisture into the body when the sun was relentless. Even more precious were the prickly pear fruits, deep red, sweet, and sticky. Gathered in midsummer, they were eaten fresh or mashed into cakes for drying. The saguaro's seeds were ground into rich meal, used in porridges and ceremonial dishes. To take food from the cactus was an act of skill and respect. It taught patience, the same patience the land demanded of its people. And in its stubborn survival, the Apache saw a reflection of themselves, enduring, adaptable, and unyielding. Beans were the quiet saviors of the Apache diet, simple, sustaining, and dependable. Tepary beans in particular were treasured for their ability to thrive in the driest of soils. Their vines curled low to the ground, hiding their pods from hungry eyes, both human and animal. Harvested in late summer, the beans were dried and stored in woven sacks. In the cooking pot, they became the heart of stews, thickened with squash and flavored with bits of meat when available. When meat was scarce, beans still gave strength for the hunt, the journey, or the battle ahead. These beans were more than food. They were a strategy against hunger. Families stored them not just for the cold season, but for the unplanned times when raids or droughts would leave the land empty of game. In those moments, a pot of beans meant the difference between resilience and ruin. The Apache were masters of moving unseen, and this skill extended far beyond the battlefield. In hostile territories, lands watched by rival tribes or encroaching settlers, they foraged with the same stealth they used in war. Small parties, often women and children, slipped through arroyos and along dry riverbeds, eyes scanning for wild edibles. Yucca roots were dug in silence, their fibrous flesh roasted until sweet. Wild onions and camas bulbs were collected quickly, wrapped in cloth, and hidden away. The goal was to leave no trace, no trampled plants, no broken stems, to avoid revealing their passage. Sometimes these journeys carried more risk than the hunt. The wrong step could bring discovery, leading to confrontation. Yet the reward was worth it. These hidden harvests could feed a family for days, and the knowledge of where such plants grew was guarded as tightly as any war plan. Time and change swept through Apache lands like an unending wind. As settlements spread and traditional hunting grounds were lost, so too went the secret gardens and foraging grounds. New foods, flour, sugar, and coffee were introduced, and the old plants were pushed to the edges of memory. Many of the vegetables once common in Apache life became ghosts. Few remembered where the wild onions grew, or how to prepare the cactus pads without a bitter bite. Younger generations learned new recipes that came in sacks and tins, not from the earth. Yet in quiet corners, some elders still carried the knowledge. They spoke of roots beneath the dust, greens in the valleys, and seeds that could wait in the earth for years before bursting into life. To remember these foods was to remember the Apache way, living with the land, not against it. The vegetables the Apache ate were never just food. They were survival, tradition, and identity rooted in the soil. Each plant carried the memory of those who found it, nurtured it, and depended on it. In remembering them, we honor not just what was eaten, but the people who endured because of it. If these stories stir something in you, share your thoughts and keep the memory alive.